Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to this Wheel and Anchor webinar on our trip Barge into Champagne. This journey begins in the City of Lights, Paris, where we'll spend a couple of nights before embarking on our cozy barge for a trip up the River Marne, where we'll pass the undulating hills of Western France, heading into the region of Champagne. We'll be sipping more than a few glasses of bubbly along the way and visiting some delightful and interesting towns and villages. If you are a regular Wheel and Anchor webinar visitor and would like to skip the introduction, then please scroll down below the description and look at our chapters, and you can jump forward to our day-by-day itinerary. If you're new to Wheel and Anchor, let me just say a few words about who we are, because we're not just another tour company. We're a community of like-minded Canadians who appreciate a different and more authentic approach to travel. We welcome anyone who understands that most organized travel has become kind of a canned experience. If you want to be herded around from one place to another and be on a hectic schedule every minute of your trip, then we probably aren't for you. But if you appreciate the camaraderie that arises from traveling with other people just like you and having enough freedom and free time to go and explore on your own, then you've come to the right place. We have a couple of objectives in mind for those who are part of our community, and specifically, that's to be well-traveled and well-connected. And what do we mean when we talk about being well-traveled? We're not talking about just ticking off boxes on a bucket list, which is not to say there's anything wrong with having a bucket list. As a traveler, we all have them in one form or another. But we're talking about the kind of travel that keeps your curiosity and your sense of adventure alive, taking part in experiences that change your perspective on how you see the world. By diving a little deeper into local culture, which might be nothing other than taking time to sit in a cafe and talk with some strangers, or striking up a conversation with an employee of a museum. You have one of those, you have the opportunity to have one of those aha moments that gives you a deeper understanding of what's really going on in the place that you're visiting. We all have someone we know who we consider well-traveled. There's often a certain wisdom about that person, almost like they know something that you don't. This is what we mean by being well-traveled. And as far as being well-connected, well, ultimately it boils down to making friends you'll actually want to keep in touch with, or at the very least have the pleasure of traveling with again on another trip. By having a crew of fellow travel enthusiasts, it means you'll always have someone to talk about travel with, because let's face it, it creates a real and meaningful connection because there's always a memory or a story to share. By being well connected, we also mean having the time to actually talk to people in the places that we visit. And I don't mean just the tour guide or our host. Traveling with Wheel and Anchor affords you the ability to connect not only with fellow travelers, but with the people who live and work in the towns and cities along the way. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work involved in delivering on this promise, and we have a great team here that's dedicated to delivering on exactly that. My name is Gordon Drager. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm the curator of all of the trips that we offer here based on my over 30 years of experience organizing travel for Canadians to all parts of the globe. And I'm not going to talk about everyone on our team, but the most important person for you to know is our senior trip specialist, Paula Sarnik. And she's the one who will answer your questions and make sure you have all the information you need to know to consider whether to join us on this or any of our trips. Our agenda for this webinar is very simple. You're somebody that's interested in champagne. You've probably tried some before. Maybe you want to find out a little bit more about where it's from or how it's made, or maybe you just want to travel with some lovely people through the countryside of France. Either way, I'm going to take you on our little digital journey through Western France on our barge trip to help you understand why this might be the trip for you. To give you a little geographical overview of what our trip entails, let's look at the map of where we're headed. Paris, of course, located in the central northern part of France, where we'll spend the first couple of nights enjoying some parts of the city that you might not have seen even if you've been a regular visitor to Paris. It's here that we'll embark on our barge, which will, over the course of 6 nights, make its way along the River Marne. And our destination will be Épernay, which is the heart of the Champagne region and where we'll spend a couple more nights to discover all about what this alluring part of France has to offer. So let's dive into our day by day itinerary, which will take us through our trip that consists of 5 nights of hotels in Paris and Epernay and 6 nights aboard our cozy little barge. We begin in Paris, a pretty easy city to get to from Canada with nonstop flights from a number of the major cities and lots of connections available. Once we arrive, we'll be transferred into our hotel in the central part of the city. Talking about bucket lists as I did before, Paris is certainly on everyone's. And whether you've visited the city before or are a first timer, there is simply so much to do. The city is old, it's new, it's gritty, it's romantic. It's the city of lights. There's so many aspects to it that, even if you've been here 3 or 4 or 5 times before, there's always a new corner to discover. From my own experiences having been to Paris, I can't even count how many times. I'm always mesmerized by what the city has to offer. We're going to be staying in the central part of the city, just off the Champs-Élysées, the famous boulevard that culminates in the Arc de Triomphe. There's a number of cafes, restaurants, brasseries that you can visit within walking distance of the hotel. And as usual on our first day, we don't undertake a whole heck of a lot. We'll get together for a little icebreaker to get to know our fellow members traveling on this trip at the end of the day and settle in for a night in preparation for our exploration of Paris beginning the next day. The focus of our visit today will be the district of Montmartre in the 18th arrondissement of Paris. I couldn't honestly say that Montmartre is off the beaten tourist track. There's hardly any part of Paris that hasn't escaped the attention of travelers, at least not any that are worth visiting. Montmartre has a certain flair to it, cobblestone streets. It has kind of this bohemian artsy flair. It's perhaps why artists like Van Gogh and Picasso had homes here. It's also considered to be one of the most romantic parts of Paris. And some of the reasons for that are the cabarets like the Moulin Rouge, which we will pass as our guide takes us around some of the lesser known alleys and passageways in this fascinating part of the city. Obviously, its culinary highlights aren't to be overlooked, and we'll have certainly an eclair at one of the top ranked patisseries in Paris before wrapping up our adventure. And in the afternoon, of course, you can continue on and stroll around the area on your own. And in any event, we'll come together again in the evening for our welcome dinner at a celebrated local restaurant. Before we head off to embark on our barge trip, we're going to embark on a little culinary experiment, uncovering how to make one of France's most prized delicacies. We'll head over to the Parisian School of Baking, where we'll learn about the history of macarons. And I'm not talking about the French president, but rather those delicious little cookies or biscuits, for lack of a better word. And we'll have a hands-on class where we'll learn how these prized sweets are made. In the meantime, you can find them all over the world, and they have a history dating back to the 16th century, but have been, repopularized in the last several decades. After we have not only the chance to make, but sample a whole bunch of these, you probably won't have any room left, but we'll then head over to our ship, the MS Deborah, to embark on our voyage down the River Marne. MS Deborah is a classic French barge at about 38 meters long and 5 meters wide. She has 10 guest cabins and some lounge space, offering a really cozy environment in which to enjoy the French countryside. The indoor lounge area comes equipped with a well-stocked bar, undoubtedly some champagne aboard. But there's lots of outdoor seating as well, where one can either dine, depending on the weather, or enjoy a beverage as we cruise down the river. During our cruise, we'll have all of our meals on board, and that'll be accompanied by a wonderful selection of local beverages that are included in the program. The cabins are cozy given the size limitations involved, but they have all the amenities that you would expect. There's a safe, there's obviously heating and cooling, Wi Fi, a phone, television, and private washroom facilities in each cabin. After our first night aboard, we'll take in a different part of Paris for our next excursion. On today's excursion, we'll head out and explore some of the iconic and famous Parisian sites. Some of them may already be familiar to you, like the Paris Opera, Place Vendôme, and of course the Louvre. Now, the Louvre, as you know, is a massive museum and requires more than just an hour or two. So if you are an art lover, and again, perhaps you've been to Paris before, or even if you haven't and you want to see the Louvre, I recommend coming a day or two early or spending a couple days at the end in order to fully get a grasp of this massive complex. In the afternoon, we'll set sail down the river as we make our way in the direction of Champagne. One of the things I like most about cruising in a barge is the slow pace that everything goes. So we'll have a leisurely breakfast on board before reaching our first stop. We'll jump off the barge in the little village of Meaux, and MS Deborah will continue down the river while we take in this charming and historical little town. Meaux is probably most famous for brie, the cheese that we're all familiar with from supermarkets back home. But it's said that the brie de Meaux is the best of the brie cheeses that you can find anywhere. I guess you'll have to come along to be the judge of that. We'll also visit the Bishop's Palace and go through the Bossuet Garden, the architect of which is alleged to have been the same one who designed the fabulous gardens at Versailles. As we head east on the morning of the following day, we'll start to see some vineyards appear on the horizon, probably Chardonnay grapes, and this will be marking the beginning of the region of Champagne. If by this point in the trip you haven't had your first sip of bubbly, then you'll get your shot when we stop in at Panier Champagne, a producer that's been going since the end of the 19th century. And what makes this particular producer's setup so interesting is the fact that their cave, which are the cellars where wine is aged in France, are in fact actual caves. We'll continue along to a little village called Chateau Thierry. This is the birthplace of the author and fabulist Jean de La Fontaine. Fabulist is someone who wrote fables, and he has, in fact, is known for over 240 different works. Among them, today's visit will include an important stop at what was the origin of Champagne. But before we get there, we'll call in at Dormont, where there is a absolutely beautiful chateau of the same name, Chateau Dormont, which is a lovely spot to sort of chill out and get some beautiful views over the countryside. But the highlight today will be Auvier, which is a small village in the foot of the Montagne de Reims Natural Park. And this is the birthplace of Champagne. Why? This is where the monk Pierre Perignon accidentally discovered the process that led to what we all know is champagne. And of course, he was later bestowed with the honor of Dom, which is where we get the name of the most famous and most expensive champagne, Dom Perignon. As our barge continues down the river on its way towards Epernay, we'll stop off and make a side trip to the city of Reims. Although it's the largest urban center in this region of Champagne, Reims has a history that goes far beyond the origins of our favorite beverage. In fact, it is known as the city of coronations because over the period of some 650 years, pretty much all of the French monarchs were crowned here, specifically at the Cathedral of Reims, a grand Gothic structure where also the surrender of Germany was coincidentally signed in front of President Eisenhower at the time. We'll culminate the day with a gala evening dinner on board our vessel that will wrap up our journey along the Marne. We'll have to hop off our barge this morning and say goodbye to the crew that has looked after us for the last week. And we'll drop our stuff at our hotel before continuing on a journey around the town, which is at the heart of Champagne. Now, while Epernay is overall not that big of a town, when you walk down the main cobblestone street, it's lined with these grand villas that house the major brands of champagne that we'll certainly recognize from restaurants and shops back at home. It really is quite a spellbinding experience. We're going to head to a small village nearby called Aix-Champagne, where we will visit a wonderful exhibit called Champagne à Pressoria, where we'll learn a little bit about the history and the art of champagne making through this very interesting interactive exhibit. We'll have a chance to sample a couple of different champagnes or grape juice if you prefer. And on that note, if you're somebody that doesn't drink a lot, if that's not your preference, you can certainly enjoy this trip by sampling some of the other wonderful juices that are produced from the same grapes that make our favorite beverage. Today, we'll venture a little further afield in the countryside of Champagne. We'll be visiting the Côte Blanc region, which is known for the Grand Cru vineyards that produce some of the best champagnes in the world. We'll also discover the historical significance of Aix, which was once really the hub of the champagne industry, now since moved to Epernay. And we'll learn about the terroir that's unique, the grape varieties, and the sustainable practices that now contribute to the modern day version of champagnes being produced. We'll have lunch at a local champagne bar because why not? And we'll celebrate our entire adventure by having a fantastic farewell dinner at one of the area's best eateries and think back about all the champagne that we've enjoyed over the course of the past 9 days. From here, our journey will take us back to Paris for a final night in this grand city. But before we leave Epernay, we'll have a little bit of time to relax and unwind and reflect on the experiences of the past several days, maybe even stopping in at one of the champagne houses to pick up a souvenir for our trip back home. And as we head back to Paris, you'll have the evening at leisure, perhaps to make a reservation, dine in at one of the iconic spots in Paris before leaving. It'll be a breakfast in the morning at our hotel near the Champs-Élysées, and then you'll have to catch your transfer back to the airport, or perhaps can make an onward journey somewhere else in Europe to capitalize on the fact that you've traveled all the way over the Atlantic. There's lots more details to be had about this program, and of course, you can find those on our website, where you can also download a copy of our detailed trip itinerary. And we also have a document we call a trip-specific reference guide, which gives a bunch of logistical information that will help answer all of those questions that you need to know before you decide whether or not like to join us on this wonderful trip. Of course, if there's anything else that you need to know that you can't find within our documentation, then by all means, drop us a note, give us a call to our head trip specialist, Paula, who'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about what this adventure entails. I hope you enjoyed our little journey around Champagne and have perhaps learned something that will inspire you to perhaps join us on this trip. About the itineraries that I mentioned just a couple of slides before, you can find those by heading to our website. The links are in the description below. And if you enjoyed this webinar and would like to hear more automatically, you can subscribe to our channel and you'll be notified every time we release a new trip webinar like this one. Thanks so much. And as they say in France, santé.